Welcome back and good evening. If you've just joined us, this is Africa News Network First Fast Live. My name is Cindy Mabi. Our top story this hour, while some groups have been vocal in demands for ABSA to pay back the bailout money, there seems to be a conspiracy of silence from others. Black First, Land First and the ANC Youth League have staged several protests at ABSA branches. However, there have been little or no comment from quarters such as the Democratic Alliance, Economic Freedom Fighters and key former ministers. These circles have waged a continual war against President Jacob Zuma and the Gupta business, but they seem to be mute when it comes to white monopoly capital wrongdoing. And let's look at some key players that have been largely silent following the public protector's findings against ABSA. EFF leader Julius Malema had promised to shut down ABSA. DA leader Mmusi Maimane has instead been fighting cases against Brian Molefe and President Jacob Zuma. And similarly, Helen Suzman Foundation went all out to have frivolous corruption charges reinstated against President Zuma. And the public interest group Freedom Under Law takes on SASA in court and urges South Africa to rethink the ICC withdrawal. The Ahmed Kathrada Foundation's call for the Gupta Gate inquiry and marches against Zuma, yet also seems mum on the ABSA corruption.
But we would have liked our organization to say something about this reports, because there's been always these things in the newspapers that our government is corrupt. Now corruption has been exposed. We expect the ANC to speak out against corruption.
The state must immediately withdraw all its accounts with ABSA, and these monies, which are lots of monies, can then be used to support the emergence of a black bank and a state bank, which will then be able to support our communities and our people as we take the minerals back to our people. The hegemony of Johan Rupert in the banking sector must end.
Some of the people have been captured. We've been saying this, that the ANC is a broad church. The ANC, being a broad church, allows for a number of people with various ideological beliefs to come into the ANC. And those who do not share the same sentiments and who support white monopoly capital will be quiet on this issue. But it is not going to end here. We will take it very far.
This is the biggest crime against South Africans. It's not just the mere numbers of billions, 1 million. These affect everybody. The students who could not go to school, the townships that are built, the lives that black people live every day. This desperations that we find ourselves in is because of the crimes that have been committed against us. The biggest Holocaust of all time against the black South Africans. And yet you have quietness. You have people who don't want to talk about this. This is, by any other mathematical calculations, the biggest crime against humanity.
And joining us in studio, Zanele Luana, Deputy National Convener of the Black First and Land First movement. Tsepo Khadima is a political analyst. Zamo Madlala is with the Black Empowerment Foundation. Carl Niehaus is MKMVA NEC member. And we'll also be joined by Alwas Valeni, who is a political analyst. Zola Goboshiane is from the Black Empowerment Foundation. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. Let's just look at the reaction that this particular ruling or rather recommendations from the public protector has enjoyed. We've even heard from the ANC, Gwede Mantashe, somewhat speaking at forked tongues. There's been the credit ratings fear around the markets and investor confidence. What do you make out of these financial institutions or some of those that want to preserve the status quo, Zanen?
We are very happy with the recommendations that have been made by the Office of the Public Protector, particularly on the corruption that took place in the South African Reserve Bank leading into 1994 in this country. We have been at the forefront as the Black First Land First movement to say ABSA, not only ABSA, with at least 4 other entities, such as Daimler Chrysler, such as Johan Rupert's family, benefited unlawfully from what is called lifeboats that were given to these financial institutions, stolen from public money that was in the South African Reserve Bank. We have seen how ABSA has arrogantly came out and said they are not obliged to pay back the money, and we are going to make sure as a movement that they pay back the money. We give them 5 days. If they do not commit on that, we are going to shut down ABSA. We are not going to tolerate arrogance from white monopoly capital leaders, racists in this country, who think and always give us a misinterpretation that corruption is black in this country. We believe that this is a lot of money. We're talking about billions that can address pressing issues such as free education, pressing issues such as youth unemployment, pressing issues that can rescue our young people that are trapped in townships today with nothing to do today. We also call, or rather caution on the hypocrisy of opposition parties today, because we have seen, for example, how a story which was on Gupta Leaks went on for at least 2 weeks. It's still going on today, but opposition parties are mum, particularly opposition parties such as the EFF and the Democratic Alliance today. We have seen how mainstream media is also trying hard to suppress the story, and we say we have been vindicated once again as the Black First Land First movement. We are going for your 100 rupee. We are going for all these other entities that are not brought into book yet, and we are happy with the recommendation from the office, and we are going to make sure that it happens.
So isn't it pragmatic leadership, as we've heard from former Governor of the Reserve Bank, Tito Mboweni, and former ministers, to say, look, this is a matter that was adequately dealt with, and it's got no success chances. Is this, in your view, an attempt to avert from the real issues of economic transformation?
Well, you see, Cindy, what we always hear from people like Tito Mboweni, and what we've also heard from some of the previous ministers of finance, Trevor Manuel, and also Pravin Gordhan, is this pragmatism. We have to engage. We have to be nice to all these international investors. Yes, it's fine. We want investment. But we need investment on terms that will create economic growth in South Africa. We cannot have investment on the basis of throwing away your most basic principles. What we have seen here in this particular instance is that a huge amount of money in the run over from the apartheid era into the democratic era went to a bank with long apartheid roots, ABSA. A huge amount of money. Money that could and should have been spent on our young people, on uplifting the vast majority of especially African people, which hasn't happened. Then there was a clear investigation on which government spent £600,000. That investigation came forward with a report that said the money has to be paid back. The then Minister of Finance, the Treasurer General in the Treasury, the Director General in the Treasury, nor the the Reserve Bank did anything about this. They kept quiet. They allowed the situation to continue. The former public protector was investigating this particular issue for years, while other reports she had to prioritize. Other reports, like the State of Capture report, had to be written in great and unseemly haste. How can it be that the issue of such importance like this could have been treated like this? And the current public protector is quite correct to say this was negligence, and it is negligence that goes right through to the point of crime. And that's why she's quite correct to say that the SIU has to investigate this matter. And I want to make one more point about it. It should not just be an investigation about what happened with regards to government and the Reserve Bank. The particular individuals that were negligent on their job, the minister responsible at that time, the Director General responsible at that time, the governor at that time, should be investigated also. And if they were negligent and criminally negligent, they should also be kept responsible criminally.
I'm not sure if the scope of the investigation will cover that. I suppose it remains to be seen. But Mr. Khadima, as Mr. Niehaus was saying, that this is a case that has been collecting dust for decades. One would argue then, why bring it up now? Is it a case of money had been spent already, or is it in the interest of rectifying the misappropriation of funds in a government institution?
Yeah, look, we are entering a long winter of discontent socio-politically. And that needs to worry us, because the stability that we seemed to enjoy for a few years of democracy is all about to vanish because of the conduct of the people that were entrusted with leadership, that in turn, when they were in their position of leadership, they not only abused their power in those positions, but it is now apparent that they actually acted unlawfully and criminally. But all the attempt, and I think maybe we have been expecting far too much, that the opposition parties would have said something, that the ANC mother body would have said something fundamental about this colossal fraud and corruption. We must bear in mind that apartheid itself was declared a crime against humanity. It is astonishing beyond belief that we can have some among us who this day would be telling us that let the bygones be bygone and we have a new South Africa, let us move forward. When we take into account we've had prodigious fraud that cannot just be left alone. And this was criminality. And since apartheid was declared a crime against humanity and against the people of South Africa, we absolutely must make sure that we do not sweep things under the carpet, that we deal with it. So for me, what is worrying is the response of all these people who have been held in high regard. And I think as South Africans are now coming to terms with really what has been going on and seeing the amount of energy that is being put to use to ensure that we do not address this grand apartheid corruption and fraud. I just cannot see how such people can expect tomorrow to say that they should ever be entrusted with leaders. But if anything, an example has to be made of those that were found to have been engaged in this colossal fraud, and it is in hundreds of billions of rands. And I've yet to see anybody who, by the way, ever challenged Stephen Goodson, who wrote a book about the Reserve Bank. The Reserve Bank has never challenged them. And most of the Reserve Bank has never explained itself. If anything, there are protests today where they say that, listen, you must leave our independence alone. Let's just tell the nation what the independence of the Reserve Bank has brought us. The independence of the Reserve Bank has brought whereby 1922 to 2013, we could print money here locally. 2013, inexplicably, we moved it out because of the independent Reserve Bank, whereby the banknotes that are signed by this current governor, they can only circulate for 3 months, have to be reprinted at a great cost, a great expense to the South African public. Now, what type of a Reserve Bank is that? Janet Yellen in the United States, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, does account to the Senate, does account to at Capitol Hill. How can it be, therefore, that this governor can expect to not have to account anywhere? The Latin is quis custodiet ipsos custodiet. Who guards the guards? When the Reserve Bank was unguarded, what happened? We've had fraud that is unimaginable. 3,000 tons of gold have been lost. And Lisicha Khanyahu, he simply says, look, that was yesterday, let us move forward. So we have a piece of paper that's got pictures on it, and what underlies the value of the rand that we say we have in our hands when the gold has been lost. All
right, let's have Zamo Madlala from the Black Empowerment Foundation. Thank you so much for your time. Do you think as a collective the nation needs to stay on this matter, albeit that the debate or focus seems to be more on the jurisdiction that the public protector has in terms of calling for reform of the Reserve Bank mandate? Do you think that this is something that as a country we cannot afford to let go of?
Certainly, Cindy, we definitely cannot let this thing go. And the reasons are quite simple. I note with very, very deep concern that within the affidavit that was issued by ABSA today, they say that since the Public Protector Office had not been established, when these loans, lifeboats, whatever they are called, had occurred, then she has no jurisdiction over those matters, and they should not have been investigated by her. Then who must defend the South African public? The public protector is put there to investigate cases that defend the ordinary man in the street who has no right to stand up for themselves. Furthermore, it's very concerning that Mrs. Manuel, I suppose I get that wrong, Maria Ramos, who happens to be Mrs. Manuel, heads this particular bank. And when this whole transaction of Barclays PLC was disinvesting from Barclays, we are told that a mere 1.5% of the marketing cap of the whole bank will be set aside for broad-based black economic empowerment and staff. Now, what joke is that? What joke is that really?
Yeah, but I'm just saying,
matters of corruption must just be left alone.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of what we always hear about, we need more foreign direct investment. We need to create a conducive environment for such investment, and the markets, etc., the rating agencies. It's enough that we in junk status. Can we afford as a country to go this route, Mr. Madlala? What is your view?
Well, we are already junk status. The majority of this country lives in junk status. When you tell us now that S&P has issued another warning today that there will be further downgrades as a result of interference in the South African Reserve Bank, what I see the public protector having done is followed the precedent that was set by the previous public protector and set recommendations. And the process is quite simple. She set a provisional report which they can then make submissions to prior to her issuing a final report, which can be taken on review. So there is a process that's in play. So then why must international organizations be threatening us because we are trying to uncover the corruption that occurred during democracy now? Never mind what happened during the years of apartheid and how the public purse has been fleeced. We've just heard about 3,000 tons of gold that has been taken. The Reserve Bank governor is saying he will take the public protector report on review. The former Reserve Bank governor, who has no standing, was quick to go and make a long Facebook and a challenge. We as a Black Economic Empowerment Foundation will certainly take up the challenge, Mr. Tito Mboweni. You have suggested that we should read the reports and then deal with the points that you put on your Facebook post. We will do so in due course. But it's just unimaginable. Is it because the masses don't have a voice? I further note with concern that there was a press statement issued by the Democratic Alliance where they are setting some process within Parliament. I think there's Nkandla ruling which has said the public protector findings are binding and they may only be set aside by review to a court. They should follow the process and not attempt to scare us when we are standing up for what is wrong, and not stand on one side only and view one side only, because corruption, as earlier stated by Zanele, that corruption is deemed black, and whatever is done by the other side.
Yeah, Mr. Madlala, stay on the line, please. Just a reaction from our panelists in studio. I mean, the contradiction that the Reserve Bank's mandate is to safeguard the rand and to deal with the inflation, or at least to curb inflation. What happened during the rand or the currency manipulation under the watch of the Reserve Bank?
That's a very good question, Cindy, because what did the Reserve Bank do when all this currency manipulation was going on? Nothing. The only thing we hear is that the Reserve Bank is supposed to be independent so that there can be inflation targeting. Now, shouldn't a Reserve Bank also be concerned about economic growth and how that economic growth is going to service the majority of the people? And shouldn't the Reserve Bank also work for the implementation of government policy when the government policy is what we have from the African National Congress, through radical economic transformation to bring about a true transformation of our economy and a sharing of our economy? Now suddenly we must hear from the governor of the Reserve Bank that they believe that the recommendations of the public protector in that regard is going too far and they will resist it. Are they resisting the distribution of wealth to the majority of people in South Africa? They must tell us that. Because if that is the position, then we have a Reserve Bank that is not interested in the interests of the majority of South Africans. Let us deal with these issues. The Reserve Bank cannot simply be a so-called independent institution. It works in the context of government policy. Nor should the Reserve Bank have individual private shareholders. That nonsense of private shareholders should come to an end. And I still want to understand why former Reserve Bank governors have gone out of their way to resist the situation where that independent individual shareholding into the Reserve Bank can be stopped. It must be stopped. We in MKMVA had a conference a week ago where we passed resolutions about economic transformation and specifically about the radical economic transformation of the power dynamics in South Africa that has to take place. And one of our resolutions that fits in very clearly with what the public protector said yesterday was that the Reserve Bank should stop being an independent institution that is not there to serve the policies and the interests of the majority of South Africans.
All right, let's unpack that for the benefit of our viewers in how, if we can demonstrate, the Reserve Bank and the Financial Ministry had systematically excluded the black majority from economic development and enjoying in the wealth and prosperity of this country, Zanel.
The Reserve Bank and its leadership today, we should not take it serious at all because the Reserve Bank today has a mandate of safeguarding the interest of white settler monopoly capital in this country. It has no mandate to make sure that our people are liberated from bondage and that we stop being marginalized from owning the means of production in this country. That's the first problem we should recognize. What should happen next is that the Reserve Bank must be nationalized by the ruling party as part of the agenda for radical economic transformation. It should be nationalized. It should be under directorship of the state so that as a nation we can have a state bank, so that we can have full licensing of black-owned banks in this country. We don't have black banks in this country because the Reserve Bank has been used as a tool to safeguard white interests in this country. Once the Reserve Bank has been nationalized, we should have full licenses of Itala Bank, we should have licenses of VBS Bank and all other institutions that seek to cater to the interests of our people. Once that has happened, government and our people should withdraw all their money from financial institutions, particularly ABSA, which has been implicated that they have looted from money that belongs to the public. Government must withdraw their accounts, break all ties with ABSA. Our people should do so. The black banks should be licensed so that as black people, we have alternative to where we want to keep our money and open up spaces where our people can directly own and participate in the growth of this economy.
Correct. What we've seen over the years is finance minister after finance minister or Reserve Bank governor eloquently telling us about austerity measures, tightening the belt, and how things are going to be difficult, to have a savings culture, all of those nice, I suppose, phrases.
We had a former Minister of Finance in Trevor Manuel who spoke about the World Bank as a treasure trove of information that should be used in the South African environment. The World Bank, after the role that it played in the underdevelopment and exploitation of peoples throughout the world, in the so-called underdeveloped nations, Latin America, Africa, very large parts of the world. But Trevor Manuel seems to think the World Bank is just the best thing that we could have had. Now, for years, we have been made the hostages of this whole thing of rating agencies. We must do this, otherwise the rating agency is going to downgrade us. We must do that. We cannot share the wealth of this country because otherwise the rating agencies are going to downgrade us. We cannot live like that. Yes, the rating agencies issue is important, But we have to deal with it first and foremost in terms of the interests of the people of South Africa. And I'm concerned that the Reserve Bank has taken ages now to give a full banking license to the post office. We need a state bank. One of the things that's coming up soon is that Barclays wants to sell Absa. We must ask ourselves what is going to happen. Why don't we get the PIC, who has the money, to buy the full share of Absa from Barclays? We can look about black empowerment and how shares could be sold to other empowerment groups later, but we make sure that through that purchase of Absa by the PIC and through a license that goes to the post office, we get a proper state bank in place, because we require it so that we can have reasonable and cheap capital being made available on reasonable rates for emerging entrepreneurs, specifically black entrepreneurs. At the moment, let me give you an example. As a black entrepreneur who haven't got the financial strength and who also haven't got the backing for a loan in terms of land or whatever, because the land had been stolen anyhow, you go and try and get a loan from some of these ordinary commercial banks, forget about it. You can go and try and get the same loan for an expensive car. You will get it, because that way the bank can hook you into a system. But empowerment of black people through capital that is available and is reasonably cheap, high corner, that is not going to happen. So we need a state bank to address these issues.
All right, these might all sound very complicated and high-end in trying to unpack, especially if nothing has been done since the advent of democracy to rectify the stronghold that either the financial ministry or the sector has had in preventing transformation. Tsepo, if you were to put it in perspective, very briefly before we take an ad break, what has been going on all along?
What has been going on all along was minimum information to the citizens, maximum confusion. How do we avoid that? We need to avoid that by really making things simple. And how to make things simple is first and foremost for those that are in authority today in these various key positions, for them to admit that they are clueless. And I mean that very politely, by the way. Unfortunately, they are very clueless, because if they indeed they knew what they were doing, there are many things that they should have done. Cindy, not long from now, and most probably towards the end of this year, there's going to be a global crash, particularly in equities. We are going to see a market crash worse than 2008. In 2008, there were a few people that could save the planet. China was one of them, because China did not have any debt. Now, when you look at it, you've got the United States that's sitting with well over 20 trillion rand in debt, $20 trillion rather, in debt, when their GDP is still sitting around just over 15 trillion. So, and you've got China that, of course, its debt has been increasing, is much higher. So what about us here in South Africa? So the issue is, even people who say that we need the rating agencies, they just don't have a ghost of an idea why we need the rating agencies. And secondly, they haven't yet come to the realization that, by the way, when the global market crash comes and is imminent, there's going to be a sell-off of our bonds here. We are going to default as a nation. Therefore, the piece of paper that we are holding in our hand is going to be valueless overnight. So there's been very fundamentally wrong monetary and fiscal policy decisions taken by the people that for a long time we have been told that they are centers of excellence, when in fact they are excelling.
All right, we're going to have to take a break. I hate to interrupt you, but we'll continue with the discussion. That was the first hour of the discussion over the deafening silence on the call for Absa to pay back the apartheid bailout. And coming up after the break, we take a look at the Reserve Bank's stance on the whole issue of paying back the money. Do stay with African News Network. First Fast Live.